Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in 2 Samuel, chapter 9, verse 1, through chapter 11, verse 27. Then David asked, "Is anyone still left from the family of Saul, so that I may extend kindness to him for the sake of Jonathan?" Now there was a servant from Saul's house named Ziba, so he was summoned to David. The king asked him, "Are you Ziba?" He replied, "At your service." The king asked, "Is there not someone left from Saul's family, that I may extend God's kindness to him?" Ziba said to the king, "One of Jonathan's sons is left. Both of his feet are crippled." The king asked him, "Where is he?" Ziba told the king, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lodabar." So King David had him brought from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lodabar. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed low with his face toward the ground. David said, "Mephibosheth?" He replied, "Yes, at your service." David said to him, "Don't be afraid, because I will certainly extend kindness to you. For the sake of Jonathan your father, you will be a regular guest at my table." Then Mephibosheth bowed and said, "Of what importance am I, your servant, that you show regard for a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's attendant, and said to him, "Everything that belonged to Saul and his entire house I hereby give to your master's grandson. You will cultivate the land for him, you and your sons and your servants. You will bring its produce, and it will be food for your master's grandsons to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will be a regular guest at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do everything that my lord the king has instructed his servant to do." So Mephibosheth was a regular guest at David's table, just as though he was one of the king's sons. Now Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. All the members of Ziba's household were Mephibosheth's servants. Mephibosheth was living in Jerusalem, for he was a regular guest at the king's table, but both of his feet were crippled. Oh man, struggling today. Looks like the stream's still going though. Good. So our computer is not wanting to put the next chapter on. It's a problem with technology. Well, if that's not working. I actually have a copy of the NET. Read it from the NASB though, since it's on hand. Now it happened afterwards that the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun his son became king in his place. Then David said, "I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me." So David sent some of his servants to console him concerning his father. But when David's servants came to the land of the Ammonites, the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun their lord, "Do you think that David is honoring your father because he has sent counselors to you? Has David not sent his servants to you in order to search the city, to spy it out and overthrow it?" So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half of their beards, and cut off their garments in the middle, as far as their hips, and sent them away. When they told it to David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly humiliated. And the king said, "Stay at Jericho until your beards grow, and then return." Now when the sons of Ammon saw that they had become odious to David, the sons of Ammon sent and hired the Arameans of Beth-rehob and the Arameans of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tob with 12,000 men. When David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army, the mighty men. And the sons of Ammon came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the city, while the Arameans of Zobah and of Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the field. Now when Joab saw that the battle was set against him in front and in the rear, he selected from all the choice men of Israel, and arrayed them against the Arameans. But the remainder of the people he placed in the hand of Abishai his brother, and he arrayed them against the sons of Ammon. And he said, "If the Arameans are too strong for me, then you shall help me." But if the sons of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will come to help you. Be strong, and let us show ourselves courageous for the sake of our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight." So Joab and the people who were with him drew near to the battle against the Arameans, and they fled before him. When the sons of Ammon saw that the Arameans fled, they also fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then the sons of Ammon against the sons of Ammon, and came to Jerusalem. When the Arameans saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together, and Hadadezer sent and brought out the Arameans who were beyond the river, and they came to Helam, and Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, led them. Now when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together, and crossed the Jordan, and came to Helam. And the Arameans arrayed themselves to meet David, and fought against him. But the Arameans fled before Israel, and David killed 700 charioteers of the Arameans, and 40,000 horsemen, and struck down Shobach, the commander of their army. And he died there. When all the king's servants of Hadadezer saw that they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Arameans feared to help the sons of Ammon any more. Let's just go with that for now. Those 2 chapters. Is there anyone who is left of the house? Well, I guess first off, a brief summary. So here you have David wanting to display kindness to the house of Saul, and asking if there's anybody left from among all of Saul's descendants. And this descendant of Jonathan, who was crippled because of an accident at near his birth, is revealed as one of the people still alive. And David brings him into the castle, well, into his palace, and displays great kindness to him, saying that he would be a regular guest at the king's table, and that everything that Saul had previously owned is now Mephibosheth's, and that Saul's servant Ziba would now be Mephibosheth's servant. Yeah. And then following that, you have the king of the Ammonites dying. And David wanted to show his condolences to his son, but rather than receiving these condolences well, he takes the envoys that David had sent and shaves half their beard off and cuts their clothes at the hips. So they were pretty well humiliated when their intentions were consolation of the king there. And they realized that they had peeved David. And so they went out and hired the Arameans along with their own troops and fought against David, and were soundly defeated, and troubled Israel no longer. So from Guzik here. Is there still anyone who is left of the house of Saul? In 1 Samuel 7, David asked, "What can I do for God?" And he proposed to build a temple for the Lord. Now David asked another question we should ask: "What can I do for others?" David's question showed a great love because Saul made himself an enemy of David. It was customary in those days for the king of a new dynasty to completely massacre anyone connected with the prior dynasty. David went against that principle of revenge and against the principle of self-preservation, and asked what he could do for the family of his enemy, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake. David did this because he remembered his relationship and covenant with Jonathan. His actions were not only based on feelings, but also on the promise of a covenant. Ziba. David could only learn that there was a descendant of Saul still living, and could only learn where he was through his servant named Ziba. This meant that Mephibosheth was in hiding. The kindness of God. The phrase is key to understanding David's motivation in this chapter. David wanted to show someone else the same kindness God showed to him. There is still a son of Jonathan who is lame in his feet. We first learned of Mephibosheth in 2 Samuel 4:4. It tells us that this son of Jonathan was made lame in his feet from an accident when they heard that his father Jonathan and his grandfather Saul died in battle. We should remember why Mephibosheth's nurse gathered the boy and fled in haste at the news of Saul and Jonathan's death. She rightly feared that the leader of a new royal dynasty would execute every potential heir of the former dynasty. A son of Jonathan. This means that according to the prior dynasty of Saul, Mephibosheth had the right to the throne. He was a son of the firstborn son of the king, and other potential heirs were dead. In a political sense, David could see Mephibosheth as a rival or a threat. Later in 2 Samuel 16, verses 5 through 8, we see a man named Shimei, who was a partisan for the house of Saul against David. There were at least a few in Israel who felt that the house of Saul should still reign over the nation, and that David shouldn't be king. Mephibosheth might draw upon these partisans and develop a rival following. Ishbosheth was Mephibosheth's uncle, and he waged a bloody war against David for the throne of Israel. There was at least an outside chance that Mephibosheth might do the same. He is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel. This speaks of Mephibosheth's low station in life. He didn't even have his own house. Instead, he lived in the house of another man. Machir, the son of Ammiel, later showed he was intensely loyal to David. When David's son Absalom led a rebellion against David, Machir supported and helped David at great danger to himself. I wonder if this showing of kindness to Mephibosheth won Machir over to David's side. Then King David sent and brought him out of the house. Mephibosheth must have been terrified when the messengers from David knocked at his door and demanded that he come with them to see the king. In the back of his mind, he anticipated the day when David would do as the other kings did and massacre every potential rival to his throne. The knock on the door also meant that Mephibosheth was no longer hidden from David. He felt secure as long as he believed the new king didn't know about him. He fell on his face and prostrated himself. According to the custom of the times, Mephibosheth had a lot to fear from David, yet his fear of David was not founded in fact, only on assumption. Up to this point, Mephibosheth and David never had a relationship, and it was because Mephibosheth wanted it that way. He avoided David out of unfounded fears. Do not fear. These words would be cruel and meaningless unless David gave Mephibosheth a reason to not fear. I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake. David made a covenant with Jonathan in 1 Samuel 20, promising to show kindness to the descendants of Jonathan. David gladly made good on his promise, though Jonathan was long dead. I will restore to you all the land of Saul. David simply promised Mephibosheth would receive what was his. Mephibosheth knew about these lands all along, but he was afraid to take possession of them, because it would expose him before the king. David went against all custom in showing such kindness to an heir of the former dynasty. And you shall eat my bread at my table continually. This went far beyond giving Mephibosheth what was rightly his. He gave Mephibosheth the honor of a close relationship with the king. A similar promise is given to the followers of Jesus. Jesus told the disciples that they would eat and drink at his table in heaven. What is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I? Mephibosheth didn't feel worthy of such generosity. He considered himself a dead dog, meaning a worthless and insignificant person. All those years of hiding from the king and living in fear and poverty made Mephibosheth think of himself as worthless. You, therefore, and your sons and your servants shall work the land for him. In addition to the land, David gave Mephibosheth servants to work the land. The food from the land was for Mephibosheth's family, because he now ate at David's table. He shall eat at my table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth was happy to know that David didn't want to kill him. To have a promise like this was almost unbelievable. Yeah, that the king should pull you out of poverty and You should become a friend of the king and eat at his table from now on and have all the lands of that you thought were lost. He was lame in both his feet. Mephibosheth's weakness did not vanish. His life was far better, but he was still lame. David's grace to Mephibosheth is a wonderful picture of God's grace to us. We are Mephibosheth. We are hiding, poor, weak, lame, and fearful before our king comes to us. We're separated from our king because of our wicked ancestors. We're separated from our king because of our deliberate actions. We separate ourselves from the king because we didn't know him or his love for us. But the king sought us out before we sought him. The king's kindness is extended to us for the sake of another. The king's kindness is based on a covenant. We must receive that king's kindness with humility. The king returns to us what we lost in hiding from him, and he returns more to us than what we lost in hiding from him. And we have the privilege of provision at the king's table, and are received as sons at the king's table with access to the king and fellowship with him. And we receive servants from the king. The king's honor does not immediately take away all our weakness and lameness, but it gives us a favor and standing that overcomes its sting and changes the way we think about ourselves. David's grace to Mephibosheth is also a pattern for us in serving and ministering to others. We are David. We should seek out our enemies and seek to bless them. We should look for the poor, weak, lame, and hidden to bless them. We should bless others when they don't deserve it, and bless them more than they deserve. We should bless others for the sake of someone else. We must show the kindness of God to others. Yeah. We'll see if Guzik's commentary on chapter 10 loads here. But yeah, I think those are both good pictures of who we are in Christ and what he does for us. It's a shame, though, later Ziba essentially betrays Mephibosheth. And during the uprising, when I think Absalom, David's son, seizes the throne, Ziba takes that opportunity to seize what Mephibosheth had. I will show kindness. David's kindness to Mephibosheth in the previous chapter didn't end his kind works. Here he showed kindness toward a pagan king because he sympathized with the loss of his father. So David sent by the hand of his servants to comfort him. David wasn't content to feel kindness towards Hanan. He did something to bring the grieving man comfort. Do you think that David really honors your father because he has sent comforters to you? It's hard to explain why these advisors to Hanan said this to the king of Ammon. It is possible that they genuinely suspected David, or they perhaps used this as a way to appear wise and cunning to King Hanan. It is common for liars to always suspect others of lying. Yeah. Those with wicked hearts don't really understand the intentions of one who is coming with a good heart. Hanan took David's servants, shaved off half of their beards, cut off their garments in the middle, and sent them away. This was a disgraceful insult to these ambassadors from Israel. In that culture, many men would rather die than to have their beards shaved off. This was because a clean-shaven face was the mark of a slave, and free men wore beards. With the value universally set upon the beard by the Hebrews and other Oriental nations, as being man's greatest ornament, the cutting off of one half of it was the greatest insult that could have been offered to the ambassadors, and through them to David their king. From Kiel. To insult the ambassadors is to insult the king. It was just as if they had done this to King David himself. The same principle is true with King Jesus and his ambassadors. Jesus reminded his disciples, "If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. Wait at Jericho until your beards have grown and then return." David didn't use these men as political tools to whip up anger against the Ammonites. He cared more for their own dignity and honor, and allowed them to wait before returning to Jerusalem. When the people of Ammon saw that they had made themselves repulsive, they knew that they did this. David didn't reject the Ammonites. They made themselves repulsive to Israel. The people of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians. This was a common practice in the ancient world. 1 Chronicles 19:6 says the Ammonites paid 1,000 talents to the Syrians. When David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army of the mighty men. This is the first mention of David's mighty men, calling them the army of the mighty men. They formed a glorious fighting force, this army of mighty men. It's important to understand that David was nothing without his mighty men, and they were nothing without him. He was their leader, but a leader is nothing without followers, and David had an army of the mighty men to follow him. These men didn't necessarily start as mighty men. Many were the distressed, indebted, and discontented people who followed David at Adullam cave. One of these mighty men was Adino the Esnite, famous for killing 800 men at one time. Another was Jeshobeam, who killed 300 men at one time. Another was Benaiah, who killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day and killed a huge Egyptian warrior with his own spear. And that's found in the Chronicles. Joab saw that the battle line was against him, before and behind. As the army of the mighty men approached the Ammonite city, they found themselves surrounded. In front of them were the Ammonites, in battle array at the entrance of the gate. Behind them were the Syrians in the field. It looked bad for the army of Israel. "If the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me." Joab had only one strategy in battle: attack. Many generals would consider surrender when surrounded on both sides by the enemy, but not Joab. He called the army to courage and faith and told them to press on. Yeah. Shows that Joab was a confident military leader, which is one of his good qualities, but I think it also gets him in trouble. It is interesting to observe that in his arrangements he made no allowance for the possibility of ultimate defeat in his conflict with Ammon. It does not seem to have occurred to him that the combination might have been too much for both of them. From Morgan. "Be of good courage, and let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what is good in his sight." This is a great speech by Joab before the battle. He made at least 3 great points. Be of good courage, and let us be strong. Courage and strength are not matters of feeling and circumstances. They are matters of choice, especially when God makes his strength available to us. We can be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might, from Ephesians 6:10. Let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God. Joab called them to remember all they had to lose. If they lost this battle, they would lose both their people and their cities. This was a battle bigger than themselves, and the army of the mighty men had to remember that. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight. Joab wisely prepared for the battle to the best of his ability and worked hard for the victory. At the same time, he knew that the outcome was ultimately in God's hands. And they fled before him. It doesn't even say that Joab engaged the Syrians in battle. This mercenary army fled before the army of the mighty men because God was with them. God promised this kind of blessing upon an obedient Israel. They also fled before Abishai and entered the city. When the Ammonites saw the Syrians retreating, they also retreated. They could no more stand before the army of the mighty men than the Syrians could. When the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered together. The enemies of Israel wouldn't quit after one defeat. They were a persistent enemy and came back to fight again. When it was told David, he gathered all Israel. David gathered the rest of the army of Israel to prevent this army of Syrian reinforcements from crushing the army of the mighty men. The result was glorious. The Syrians fled before Israel. The chapter ends with unfinished business at Rabbah. The offending Ammonites were still in their city, and Joab returned to Jerusalem. In the spring, King David sent Joab and the army out again to deal with Rabbah as he waited in Jerusalem. While he waited comfortably in Jerusalem, he fell into sin with Bathsheba. Many know about David's sin with Bathsheba and how it happened when David waited in Jerusalem when he should have led the battle at Rabbah. 2 Samuel 10 shows that God gave David a warning by showing it necessary for him to come out against the Syrians. David tried to leave the battle with Joab in 2 Samuel 10, but his army needed him. and God tried to show him that by blessing when David did go out to battle. 2 Samuel 10 was God's gracious warning that David sadly wasted. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a picture of how when we neglect to do what God has us to do, we have the very real possibility of not only neglecting that, but falling into sin. So, anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.